universities to decide which courses and classes will welcome back students for face-to-face learning.
We cannot require all schools to do face-to-face because there are schools that have been doing distance learning and flexible learning even before the pandemic.
The CHED chief says some programs needing hands-on training may return to classrooms and laboratories, but others may face-to-face classes in the tertiary level, but still expects thousands of students to return to school.
I anticipate that starting the opening of this school year, there will be a very significant shift to face-to-face classes. But we cannot have face-to-face for all degree programs, because the degree programs are constructed differently.
Business leaders are supportive of the reopening of schools, saying it will help address the country's education crisis, which was worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. It will perk up economic growth too.
I think it's a good move. When the kids go to school, they have to spend for their baon, they have to take the transportation, so everything just gets re-energized, and the impact on the quality of the education of our people, of our children, I think will be improved.
The private sector gathered Wednesday their call for twin reforms that will provide healthy food and higher quality of learning for children. 3 business groups push a joint agenda to improve access for pregnant moms and poor families to provide food for their kids to prevent stunting, not by taking feeding programs from school, but to start at home.
Education has the promise of better employment, earnings, health, and quality of life. Make education and learning a priority. Invest in the lifelong learning of our people.
Both CHED and the private sector backed President Bongbong Marcos's call to review schools' curricula as they seek to address skills mismatch, or when graduates lack the proper training needed to land well-paying jobs. De Vera says study plans have been updated with the shift to the K-12 program, but still need to keep up with new technology. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
Meanwhile, the CHED lifts the 11-year order banning new public and private colleges from offering nursing programs. CHED says it reviewed the stoppage at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ban was imposed in 2011 because of what was seen as a gradual decline in the performance of teachers and students and an oversupply that left nursing graduates without jobs. Overcrowding has long been an issue in some public schools, and now they face the dilemma of welcoming all their students back this November while implementing COVID-19 protocols. AC Nichols has that story.
Principal Gilbert Inocencio heads one of the most populated high schools in the country. Rizal High School in Pasig City, which has received the safety seal, is among the first public schools to conduct limited face-to-face classes. But by November, the Education Department expects physical classes to resume at full capacity.
Kailangan pag-usapan yung realities eh. Okay naman yung yung mga ganyang suggested implementation of the policy na mag-pull nga face-to-face na tayo. Kaya lang different schools have different situations.
Like many other public schools in Metro Manila, overcrowding is a recurring problem in Rizal High School, and it faces the same challenge as the DepEd mandates all enrolled students to attend classes in person.
The school has over 12,000 students from grades 7 to 12. Officials say they need almost 300 classrooms to accommodate all currently enrolled. For now, though, only about 136 rooms are ready for use.
This, as a number of Rizal High's classroom buildings had been converted into COVID-19 isolation facilities due to lack of enough hospitals and other medical facilities.
Aware naman ng City Hall na we're also preparing for the opening. Pero, syempre, nandun pa rin yung idea na papaano kapag nag-surge talaga.
In the meantime, other public schools are looking at Rizal High as an example of how to hold in-person classes safely amid the threat of COVID-19. Officials from a school in Bicol made the long trip to check out the school's safety protocols. They saw improvised hand-washing facilities and separate containers for modules, among others. As for grade 10 student John Portugal, requiring everyone to attend in-person classes may lead to bigger problems.
Lalong dadami yung case ng COVID and pwedeng magkaano po,
new policy is feasible, especially with another possible surge in COVID-19 cases. But for now, the DepEd is determined to make face-to-face classes at full capacity a reality before the year ends. AC Nichols, CNN Philippines.
Authorities are set to reopen a major portion of EDSA ahead of schedule. George Quiles joins us live for more details. George, why will the EDSA Kamuning southbound section reopen earlier than planned?
Opia, other than the potholes and cracks that were found in along the southbound lane, the Public Works Department did not see any other damages to that EDSA Kamuning flyover with their assessment. Now, they're eyeing to reopen that flyover on July 23 at 5 in the afternoon. If you can remember, the southbound lane of the EDSA Kamuning flyover was closed to traffic on June 25. And the initial plan was to finish the repairs within a month. And since then, this traffic situation is getting heavier in this area in Quezon City.
Tapos na po namin halos lahat yung major structures. Yung approach na lang po sa down ramp sa NEPA Q side na 2 lane ang ginagawa namin. In spite of the not very good weather condition, na-anticipate naman namin po yan since the start. Kaya nakakapagtrabaho kami even during heavy downpour.
Meanwhile, as for preparations for the face-to-face classes, LTFRB Chairperson Cheloy Garafil says they are studying the possibility of opening more routes under their Libreng Sakay program. As of now, the EDSA busway is the only remaining route under that program. On Tuesday, Garafil tried the EDSA busway system during rush hour to have a first-hand experience on the situation. She said there is a need to fix the dispatching system by deploying more buses during rush hour to avoid long lines.
Napansin ko, medyo reactive yung nagiging sistema doon. Pag meron lang nagbi-build up, saka lang magpapadala ng sasakyan. So talagang, kaya nagkakaroon ng long lines. So, kung magkakaroon ng seat management system, may prepositioning na tayo ng mga vehicle even before magkaroon ng mga influx ng mga tao.
The LTFRB will also work on the route rationalization plan so that they will see the bigger picture on the availability of public transportation and see the areas where they may still open new routes. Back to you, Pia.
George, the group operating the EDSA bus carousel has claimed that drivers are not paid on time. What is the response of the LTFRB to this?
Well, Attorney Garafil was telling us earlier that she was able to talk to the members of the EDSA bus consortium and promised to pay promptly so that the services that they're offering to the public will not be affected anymore. Back to you.
George Quiles there reporting. The pandemic is nowhere near over. Those words coming from the World Health Organization as it flags new waves of infections across the globe. The WHO warns the more infectious Omicron subvariants are driving an increase in cases.
The virus is running freely and countries are not effectively managing the disease burden based on their capacity. As the virus pushes at us, we must push back. We're in a much better position than at the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, we have made good progress. We have safe and effective tools that prevent infections, hospitalizations, and deaths. However, we should not take them for granted.
The WHO reminds the public that COVID-19 vaccines are still effective at preventing severe disease and death. Coming up on Newsnight, Sri Lanka's Prime Minister is now acting president after the embattled president and his wife fled the country. And Queen Elizabeth II confers the highest civilian honor for gallantry on a Filipina-British nurse. You're watching CNN Philippines.
DXKP Pagadian, ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN, Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. pinaagi sa Google Play, Apple Store, YouTube o kusgan nga inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back to Newsnight on CNN Philippines. In global headlines, Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has been appointed as acting president just hours after the embattled president Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country with his wife for the Maldives. Rajapaksa, who was supposedly to formally resign today, made the appointment, citing a law allowing the premier to take over when the president is ill or absent. Wickremesinghe he was also expected to step down as prime minister on Wednesday. Wickremesinghe has called for a state of emergency across the crisis-hit country. He ordered defense officials to impose a curfew in the capital, Colombo, and the rest of the western province amid another round of massive protests. Back here at home, a Quezon City Court denies the request of alternative news outlet Bulatlat to unblock its website. A legal counsel of Bulatlat says the court did not see an urgent need to unblock bulatlat.com since the presiding judge and other court members were still able to access the site. Bulatlat argued the memorandum prevents them from exercising their right to publish news. It also said it is not within the power of the NTC to block websites without any court order. Bulatlat sought a stay order against the June 8 directive pushed for by former National Security Advisor Hermogenes Esperon.
Ang kliyente ko po ay si retired General Esperon. Yun po ay isang bagay na inilabas din namin po sa korte na hindi na po siya opisyal ng pamahalaan.
Last month, we registered more than 60,000 unique visitors. And then since the memorandum, naging half siya, no? So there is really the direct impact. We call on the National Security Advisor Clarita Carlos to resign the memo issued by the NTC.
The hearing for preliminary injunction on the case will take place August 2nd. In other news, Filipinos are divided on the new 1,000 peso polymer bills. Some are in favor of the new design. Others, who are afraid to mishandle the new bill, prefer the old banknote. Amid public confusion, a center wants to suspend the polymer notes issuance and production. Tristan Odalo report.
Yan po talaga kailangan yung wallet mo yung mahaba kasi pag natupi po baka mamaya hindi natanggapin ng iba.
They believe this is for security purposes and teaches Filipinos the proper way to handle money regardless of its material.
Pwedeng ganyan lang siya. Wag naman yung scramble. Pwedeng ganyan pagka limawa. Di ba? Pwede naman pag namili ka kasi pag wala kang wallet. Hindi naman kasi maganda yung paggagawa May plastic siya.
Following claims made on social media, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP clarifies and advises retailers and banks to accept folded bills. The BSP also reiterates its reminders on how to handle banknotes.
Huwag po natin masyadong i-crumple. Ganon din naman po dun sa paper banknote natin. Dinidiscourage namin ang publiko, huwag natin siya isubmerge sa chemicals o huwag po natin siyang plantsahin. Bawal po siyang staple, bawal po siyang sulatan.
Senator Coco Pimentel believes the change in monetary design is impractical. He also wants to put a stop on the production and issuance of the new polymer notes.
Sa dami ng naririnig natin na don'ts, yung mga bawal gawin, mas nag-aalala ngayon ako, are we introducing really a more durable banknote or are we just giving unnecessary burden and obligations on our people? Siguro maghinay-hinay na muna ang BSP, kasama yan sa resolution ko, ilabas ang mga reklamo. Dapat umabot sa BSP.
The lawmaker also laments the impact of the shift to polymer to local abaca producers.
High-tech polymer pero plastic pala yan, plastic. Wala na pong made in the Philippines dyan na raw material.
Pimentel says his resolution may be tackled by the Senate Committee on Banks or Economic Affairs. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
A Filipino business tycoon receives the highest order of merit in France. San Miguel Corporation President and CEO Ramon Ang was awarded the Legion of Honor by the French government for his economic contributions to Manila-Paris relations. Ang thanked France for the distinction as he vowed to strengthen efforts to boost the economy. When we come back, the PBA will look into domestic abuse allegations against one of its players. We speak to sports lawyer Mickey Ingles live. And this Filipino-British nurse who made headlines amid the global pandemic receives the highest civilian award from Queen Elizabeth II. Stay tuned.
RPN DXKP Pagadian.
Ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world pinaagi sa FB page karon mag-download na pinaagi sa Google Play og Apple Store, YouTube og Twitter. Alang sa mas kipakuskan nga mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran og kalingawan. Ang mas kipakuskan nga inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
A warning that violence will be mentioned in this report. PBA athlete Paul Desiderio Uvero posted that the Blackwater player strangled and threw her against the wall while she was 2 months pregnant with her child. Desiderio has not yet responded to our request for comment. The PBA in a statement says it will conduct its own inquiry into the matter. Blackwater Bossing vows to look into the situation and possibly state its position if the allegations are true and the player gives his consent. We now go above and beyond the headlines with sports lawyer Mickey Ingles. Attorney Mickey, hi. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Well, let's shine the light on this, shall we, Attorney Mickey? Can we go back first to the previous cases of several PBA players who faced similar allegations? I wanted to start with this because Siege Nantenko had tweeted and posted about this, no? Parang let's do a little review. Can we do that, Attorney Mickey?
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, well, can you recount those players and what the allegations were against them and what happened to those allegations and if there were any investigations?
Okay, so according to Siege's tweet, there has been like one Vowsy case per year since 2018 involving PBA players. I think the players were Mac Cardona, Halalon, Bo Belga, and now Paul Desiderio. right? What happened to these cases, I don't know because we don't have any reports on what actually happened to these players. So I don't know what the PBA did with these players because some of them are still playing. So I'm not sure if that's because they found that after their investigation, nothing did happen or something was worked out, right? So I really can't answer what happened with these
Okay,
cases.
but
So that's the long and short of
but
it.
would you know if there were cases filed against them or hindi na umabot sa ganoon?
I honestly don't think there were cases filed against them. At least from the news reports that I've been reading about the past cases involving PBA players.
Well, Agatha Uvero herself posted about it on social media earlier today, this morning. So it kind of took social media by storm. No, and daming reactions. What was interesting here was that she detailed all these allegations of emotional and physical abuse. And I wanted to ask you if everything that she said there, no, and there's a whole long list of them, it's a litany of supposed alleged violations. Are these violations of the Violence Against Women and Children Act or VAUSI? They are, right?
Yes, they are. They are because if everyone remembers, violence against women and children, they cover any acts by an intimate person against a woman who was either his wife or former wife or with a person whom he has sexual relations or in a dating relationship with. So that covers the dating relationship between Agatha and Mr. Desiderio, right? And the acts covered by VAUSI include physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and economic abuse. So the litany of alleged acts stated by Agatha in her tweet fall within physical violence and psychological abuse. So if these allegations are true, then they are clear violations of VAUSI.
They may be allegations of violations of the VAUSI. However, these are social media posts. We've been told, and we're not quite sure, no, that she had this blottered already. However, hindi pa po ito, Attorney Mickey, ang kaso, right? If she wants to take this any further, she needs to file a case, correct?
Yeah, definitely. So under VAUSI, you have actually two options whenever you are faced with abuse by your intimate partner and you're a woman. Number one, you can file for a protection order with the barangay. And alternatively, or maybe even as an addition to it, you can file a criminal case. So VAUSI is a criminal law. If Mr. Desiderio is found guilty of these acts, he will be facing jail time. But of course, that depends on Agatha if she wants to push through with filing a case in court.
You know, people would say kasi, some people would venture to guess na pwede bang hindi na lang mag-file ng kaso, hindi ba pwedeng gobyerno na lang sampa ng kaso. Pero ang kaso, yung People of the Philippines versus so-and-so, that can only happen kung may complainant. Meaning, in this case, the woman here, Agatha, in this case, right? Kailangan siya mag-file ng kaso para maging People of the Philippines versus Paul Desiderio. Is that correct?
Well, VAUSI is a public crime, so technically anyone can file for Miss Agatha. But the question is, how will the prosecution proceed if Miss Agatha doesn't want to at least participate in giving her affidavit or giving her side? So that's the rub there, right? I mean, if she wants to participate, then she can file it on her own. If she doesn't want to participate, someone else can file it for her under VAUSI. But how will we get her side during trial and during?
And what is the reason why?
Right? So
what is the reason, Attorney Mickey, why women don't usually want to file a case? They will talk about it, magpo-post sa social media, and this has happened in the past. We've seen that happen. And then hindi magsasampa ng kaso.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of that, and it's for a number of reasons. Number one is the stigma that they might face, right? So Agatha posted about it, and immediately she got people telling her that it's not true, or people telling her that it's her fault, right? And we've seen that in a number of cases whenever a woman comes up to speak. Another reason why a woman might not want to file a case of VAUSI is because of the costs. And another reason might be based on emotion, because if you file a case of VAUSI, you will have to see your abuser in court. right? You will have to face him. You will have to give testimonies against him. And some women might not want to do it and just go on their own way.
Yung binanggit mo kanina lang, Attorney Mickey, ito yung sinasabing victim shaming, right? Palaging may dahilan, kasi ikaw, kasi ganito ganyan, etc. Right?
Yes, victim shaming. Yeah.
And we should shine a light on this because, like we've already pointed that, like what has already been pointed out, ang dami nang lumalabas, lumilitaw na ganito, specifically sa PBA, pero wala naman talaga nangyayari.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if what we've seen so far since 2018 is real, then the PBA should really step in to address the situation. I mean, the PBA has released a statement that they're going to investigate, but hopefully the investigation here really pushes through and something can be seen based on the investigation. Yeah, the PBA has the grounds under its constitution and bylaws to look into misconduct by its players, right? There's a morality clause there that mandates the players to have good moral character, to not do anything that might destroy the reputation of the game or the sport, and domestic violence does the same.
At kailangan matuloy pa rin ang investigasyon kahit walang kaso. I mean, you know, for some reason, biglang magsabi si Agatha Uvero na hindi na ako magsasampa ng kaso. Just in case. Kailangan tuloy pa rin yung investigasyon.
Yeah, definitely. So the investigation of the PBA and the filing of a criminal case by Agatha are totally independent. The filing of Agatha is a criminal case which involves our local courts. The investigation by the PBA will be an administrative matter handled by the rules and regulations of the PBA, so they can go separately and independently.
Thank you so much for your insights, Attorney Mickey Ingles, sports lawyer. Salamat, Mickey. In other news, a Filipina-British nurse who administered the first COVID vaccine in the world was honored by the UK's Queen Elizabeth II with the highest civilian award for gallantry. May Parsons received the George Cross Award representing the medical staff of the country's National Health Service. The honor recognizes, quote, acts of the greatest heroism. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8. I'm Pio Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
It mirrors the old adage that prevention is better than cure. Today, we'll learn more benefits of practicing good hygiene and its overall effects on our mental health. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to discuss the importance of hygiene. With us is Dr. Aika Buenavista. She's a lifestyle medicine specialist from Signature Medical Concierge. Also joining us is AJ Sung Lao. He's a psychologist from Mind Plus by Life Science. Good hygiene involves a lot of self-discipline. If there's one silver lining that this past pandemic has brought about, was that increased consciousness on good hygiene. I'll start the discussion with Dr. Aika. Please explain to our audience, what exactly are we trying to achieve here by having the habit of good hygiene?
First of all, it's really important that we do practice good hygiene in order to help us keep our bodies healthy and clean. It's not only good for our physical health, but also our mental well-being, right? And we're not only helping ourselves, but also the people around us because we prevent illnesses in the first place. Aesthetically wise, we feel good about ourselves, about our appearance. And in a social level, usually we would avoid people with poor personal hygiene because of body odor, and thus this can result to isolation and loneliness. So as you can see, our hygiene impacts our overall well-being.
AJ, is having good or bad hygiene a sign that there is probably some behavioral problem involved here? Because we have to also understand that hygiene is somewhat culturally related. The hygiene that we're used to here in the Philippines may be different in other parts of the world. What can you say about that?
It's really cultured. How far are we acting relative to what we're used to in our culture? And malaking bagay nga sa Pilipinas, lalo nga na ang, let's say, pagliligo araw-araw, brushing your teeth every day. So these basic things. And if we're having poor hygiene, we're really going away from that norm, which could be a sign of many things. Again, in the pandemic, the extreme has really been doing it too much. While, very common din for people struggling with their mental health na not let go nila to.
When it comes to mental health, AJ, what are some of the red flags? Kumbaga, ano yung cut-off ng level of hygiene ng isang tao dito sa Philippines to be considered, kumbaga, mentally healthy?
Yung pinakamadaling may mental is how much is it disrupting our day-to-day lives? Na-mention nga kanina na, for example, nahiya tayo lumabas ng bahay dahil nga we're not being hygienic, or we're not feeling clean, or we're getting sick, we're getting very common issues na could be solved by good hygiene. Let's say, gum problems or nag-breakout skin natin dahil nga di tayo naliligo. So, these are things that could already be signs that we might be dealing with something, a mental illness now or severe symptoms of one.
Now, I'll go back to Dr. Aika. When it comes to basic hygiene, what is considered basic?
Okay, actually, we do have different types of hygiene. So first, for example, your dental hygiene. Another type of hygiene is your hand hygiene. And another type of hygiene is, of course, our nails. And of course, we have toilet hygiene, properly disposing tissues that we use, especially if you have an infection. You don't want to spread it within the home. Okay, so we have to practice that proper etiquette inside the toilet.
Pandemic-induced anxiety is a real thing and may have also made some people who have been working at home more anxious and have these certain feelings, especially when it comes to contacting diseases, maybe germs. Now, AJ, let's talk about that for a minute. Is it normal to still be anxious nowadays na ma-infect or makapitan ng germs or kumbaga takot lumabas because baka mahawa ako ng COVID?
Now we've seen it nga over how the pandemic goes. I think that shows really it's okay to be anxious about COVID. I think that's a normal state talaga because it's an illness. Even if you're vaccinated, we still don't want to get sick. But really what we're seeing over the growing COVID anxiety and growing health anxiety is really habits and mga behaviors na lagpas na talaga doon wherein we've had people not go out at all for years. And as the economy is opening up, more and more people are trying to meet face-to-face. Sometimes it could also limit the kind of opportunities that we get. We're also seeing people that, as you mentioned, are still hoarding, let's say, cleaning supplies, they're still hoarding alcohol, and it's really become to the point it's debilitating na.
That's correct. But the question now is, how does that affect your overall mental health? Because this pandemic has made it uneasy for those who struggle with a condition called germophobia. Now, germophobia is the fear of germs. And in this case, germs refer broadly to any microorganism that causes disease. For instance, bacteria, viruses, or even parasites. Now, AJ, can you please tell us more about this fear of microbes in general? What causes a person to be considered a germaphobe?
COVID is a perfect example because the entire environment became hostile to you. And we know it's a virus, we know you can get it. Early in the pandemic, the belief was you can get it from surfaces. That's why we were cleaning everything or having UV everything. The thresholds here is, as I mentioned kanina with bad hygiene, na how much of it is disrupting your day-to-day life na? Is it really affecting you in a way that makes relationships harder, that gives you, going outside, you're already feeling anxious, that just thinking about it makes it scary for you? These symptoms that onting isip mo pa lang may anxiety na, and this could be triggered by things, again, over the pandemic, say trauma, nagkasakit kayo or someone in the family, just the overall overwhelmingness of the news in the surges of the pandemic could also trigger this.
Now, Dr. Aika, it's a good thing that a lot of people are more hygienic conscious nowadays, but is there a right or wrong way to actually be hygienic?
The thing about that, it can lead to health risks. Okay? So this can be so persistent that it would affect our day-to-day life to the point that they would fear going out, just eating in a restaurant, or even doing sexual relationships with their partners. They fear going out to places that have a lot of germs, like public bathrooms, public transportation. They don't even go to school, to work. They are scared of touching doorknobs or shaking hands with somebody they just met. And it can also lead to a disorder called OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where we see patients would have to wash their hands 10 times after they eat, or they would have to shower 10 times in a day, or clean a surface 20 times. So as you can see, it's a dramatic response that is not necessary. Plus, it is time consuming. So the whole day, they're just cleaning and they don't do anything else but just clean. They cannot work. They cannot do their school task as well. They can even take care of themselves or even their children if they're parents. And so as you can see, it's affecting the overall well-being of a person.
When we come back, we'll discuss what happens when you practice good hygiene but still experience body odor. We'll be right back here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. We've been discussing proper hygiene and some of the effects, but what happens if even though you practice good hygiene, you still notice a sense of body odor lingering on yourself? Now, Dr. Aika, when it comes to body odor, how is this produced? A lot of people will note, obviously, body odor by this aroma in themselves. What causes this? Let's dive deep into the cause of this.
Yes, so for body odor, it's not just about the hygienic practices of a person, but it's a mix also of our sweat glands, how it activates in our body, as well as bacteria. So it can also change because of our hormones, especially if there's hormonal imbalance, even the food that we eat, okay, certain infections that we might have already, medications that we are drinking, and other underlying conditions like diabetes. So they can also have body odor as a complications.
Dr. Aika, you bring up some very good points there. Now, let's tackle them a little bit more specifically here. When it comes to, you mentioned glandular problems, maybe the sweat glands. What is happening here? Anong nangyayari? Bakit nagkakaroon ng body odor?
So the first thing, of course, when especially it's a bit smelly, doctors would have to investigate further, especially trying to check if a patient has diabetes, gout, menopause, or undergoing menopause, if they have a very hyperactive thyroid, or they have a liver problem, as well as a kidney problem, and even other infectious disease. It can, of course, be due to hormonal changes. So, for example, for those who are undergoing menopause, they have hot flushes. For women, okay, it is expected that during ovulation, in their menstrual cycle, the body's odor also changes. So that's a normal occurrence in females.
Now, Dr. Aika, how about when it comes to certain foods? What component in that food creates a reaction in the body that may promote hyper secretion of the glands and then thus cause some body odor?
Yeah, so some foods actually have a high amount of sulfur, and sulfur is the one that causes that a bit of rotten smell, and they can be obtained from onions, garlic, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and red meat. We also sometimes use spices, right, to give taste to the food, like for example MSG. Even spices like curry can give that certain odor, and hot sauces as well.
Now, AJ, as discussed by Dr. Aika, there are several things that may cause body odor that are beyond the control of the individual. Now, let's discuss that. How does this affect? Because kahit na they're practicing good hygiene, they have good hygiene habits, meron pa rin talagang smell. And it can affect them in both their relationships. As we mentioned earlier, it may be culturally unacceptable in certain areas. What effect can this happen to the individual?
The first year is really frustration. Na imagine I'm doing everything I need to, I'm doing it well, but it's still happening, I still notice a body odor from me, so that can cause frustration. On a more social level though, there could be baka ma-ostracize ka or mabully ka. Children are susceptible to this, especially some kids don't really know how these things happen, especially again in puberty where these kinds of perceptions are matter. Na, pagka may BO ka, as what people call it, it could lead to people to bully you, to make fun of you. As an adult, there's a lot of shame. Now, might want you to recess a bit, might want you to, ay, kasi lumabas ako because I'm ashamed of my body odor.
How should parents approach this then? Should they reinforce the security of the child, or should the parents try really and find ways on how to manage that odor to fit in the society that they're in?
I think, of course, the number one thing here parents should really do is, of course, make sure they know the cause. Now, as Dr. Eka mentioned earlier, body odor, especially with good hygiene, might be caused from an infection or certain diseases. So, number one, let's make sure that's not it. But on specifically just the child, of course, one thing is really to communicate to the child that often it's not them, right? Children can be mean, certain individuals can be cruel, and that's something that's outside of our control. Like, we can't really control how they react, but then we can prepare the child to be able to manage how they respond to those kinds of, let's say, bullying, those kinds of actions. At the same time, hopefully, so in a school, we also talk to the teachers or talk to the administrator to make sure that at least we prevent them.
AJ mentioned how important it is to find the reason for that body odor and to address that. Let's talk about addressing that. If someone has BO because of hyperactive sweat gland, what type of treatments are usually used to manage this?
So first of all, if you do have body odor, it's best to consult your doctor first. I know there are a lot of information online that would be sold as home remedies, but of course, remember that this also is treated by medications and procedures. Like, for example, we do small injections of Botox in the armpit. There are also some prescription medications that we give to patients, even antibiotics, especially if it is bacterial in nature. Some even would have very severe conditions that would need surgery. So we also have to dive into the personal hygiene of the patient, which we do as lifestyle medicine of physicians, even focusing on the stress level of a person, because remember, as I mentioned a while ago, that odors can also stem from the stress level of a patient.
Now, coming up, we'll give you tips on how to practice better hygiene, only here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, where your care always comes first. Now, we've been talking about good hygiene and habits to establish in order to continue to practice good hygiene. With that in mind, Dr. Aika, what are some tips that you could share with our viewers in trying to practice good hygiene? In essential good hygiene tips, let's start with taking a bath. Is the type of soap important pag naliligo ang isang tao? And is there a certain time limit na dapat? Because we all know when it comes to brushing our teeth or washing our hands, there has to be some level naman of time for you to have those effects of good hygiene. When it comes to bathing, what are some tips that you could share with the viewers?
It would depend on the skin concern of course, of the patient. So for example, if they do have a fungal infection, we would prescribe fungal soaps. If the patient has sensitive skin, of course, we would prescribe very hypoallergenic skin soaps in the first for the body. And with regards to the timing, of course, for example, for brushing your teeth, at least 2 minutes is already enough, as long as it is done properly in a circular manner. And of course, they do have to floss every day, at least before going to sleep. With regards to hand washing, you would also want to use any soap is fine as long as it's mild soap within the 5-step recommendation of course, WHO. Again, washing your hands under running water and then making sure that the soap would bubble or lather, rubbing them on the back of your hands, between your fingers and underneath your nails.
Now, AJ, with all of this, all the tips in mind, what can you advise our viewers who are still anxious to go out, who are still anxious because the pandemic is still with us? That is still a reality, and it causes that level of anxiety. It affects their work, it affects their performance. What advice can you give them?
I think the number one advice really is, of course, let's check our habits again. Because of how long the pandemic has been, we've really kind of normalized our habits in the pandemic mindset. But as we now go outside of this, as again, the economy opens up, we're able to go out, we can start creating habits again that kind of normalizes our lives in this space. So it could be something like going out with friends. We could schedule that from dati online meetups. Now we can do it face-to-face. These are things that we don't have to do alone. I think that's also an important reminder. We could have family members, like, say, go out to an open park where we feel it's safer, or go out in places with good health protocols in place. So we don't have to like suddenly go out and all in tayo agad. We can do it step by step as we try to, again, kind of reacclimate ourselves to the world.
For those who are still unsure about their current mental health, especially now that the pandemic is hopefully on the tail end, is this something that they should try and internalize? Is it okay for them to talk to mental health specialists such as psychologists or even psychiatrists, even counselors? Where can they go?
Number one, I think what we always tell people is there's no wrong time to seek professional help. Like, you don't have to be at the brink, you don't have to be at the end of your wit to ask for support. So anytime is okay, even if you're feeling okay. Where can people go? So there's a lot of clinics. I myself is in Mind Plus by Life Science. That's based in BGC. Of course, there are other clinics. You can find them in resources. DOH has a list of all accredited mental clinics. There's also referral systems like silakbo.ph/help that you can go to check which clinics might be near you. So one benefit of the pandemic is a lot of therapists have went online. So if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to meet anyone face-to-face yet, that's also an option. But as we move this pandemic along, we do expect that most therapists, most counselors, even psychiatrists, will return to a more hybrid setup where they'll have a face-to-face clinic for those that really need it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aika Buenavista and AJ Sunglao, for being with us today and sharing your tips as well as your expertise about personal hygiene. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.